All right, guys. Of course, I've been gone for a few days. You know, my mom's birthday or whatever. Yeah, doing the thing, up in age or whatever. But yeah, back to that video stuff. And of course, I gotta check out my boy Young. Live service games are dying by the dozen. Of course, I've seen this online. I heard it was like something like 10 plus live service going offline. I was like, God damn. I thought it may be 5 or something. Fucking like about 10 plus. Could be 40, goddamn it. You never know. Yeah. But yeah, let's check out Young's video. You know what to do?
That the future of gaming would be entirely reliant on live services. That live services was the way of the future.
Of course.
And that this is where gaming is headed as a whole. But they're not seeing that
They say that, of course, because there's some greedy ass companies that say this shit. That's where it comes from.
tune anymore. It has been an onslaught for live services these past couple of weeks. Many of them have gotten canceled behind the scenes or shut down after their launch.
For sure.
And we heard some of the casualties recently when it was reported by Bloomberg that EA canceled not only a single player Titanfall / Apex Legends crossover game.
It's EA though.
To be essentially a Titanfall single
EA literally canceled like what, 4 or 5 Star Wars games? Like right before they made Battlefield 2 or something like that, they canceled like 4 games. They were like in production, like for like 3 Star Wars games. Like right after the first Battlefield or whatever, they had like 3 or 4 games scheduled, and then all of a sudden they just like cancel. Oh, this was in development for about maybe 1 or 2 years. Cancel. Like. There was so many, and some of them had some interesting takes. You thought it would be like maybe another KOTOR or something like that, and they canceled like every damn Star Wars game that wasn't Battlefront 2 or Battlefront series, none of that.
Campaign with Apex Legends elements, but also we learned that a number of mobile live services got shut down, like Battlefield Mobile here, which this developer found
again, I'm not surprised this is still EA we're talking about.
Out of nowhere, a game he'd been working on for almost 3 years. And in parallel, we saw Respawn announce that we have made the decision to sunset Apex Legends Mobile. The game will sunset on May 1st, 2023 at 4 p.m. Pacific. A few days prior, on January 19th, 2023, it was confirmed that Ubisoft had canceled an upcoming live service game, a PvP game named Project Q. This comes after the shutdown of their Battle Royale live service, Hyperscape, and
that was
also
one
the cancellation of another Battle Royale project from the Ghost Recon franchise, Ghost Recon Frontline.
I'm actually really surprised that they didn't go like the Assassin's Creed online route, because they was putting out Assassin's Creed like crazy, and then they made Hyperscape. I was like, wow, that was a change of pace for once.
Was so poorly received they decided to not go forward with it, and the list just continues. A few days prior to that, on January 20th, 2023, it was announced that Marvel's Avengers would be shutting down via this blog post right here, which states, scrolling down here, that official support will cease on September 30th, 2023. Now, this game won't completely shut down. Both single player and multiplayer gameplay will continue to be available, but it's basically going to be on live support. The live service component is very much as good as dead. It's just not something that's going to get continuously updated.
Again, this is a kind of the thing with Marvel. Marvel always try to make their games brand new, or try to give it to studios that, kind of make their game, or, give their license to their games. Of course, it can pay off, like, a Marvel Sony deal. It can work that way, it can work really good, or it can go terribly bad live service game, as we saw.
Anthem, it's still accessible, but the live service component is very much dead, so there's no reason for people to keep revisiting this title. More casualties were observed in the month of February 2023, among them being the Xbox exclusive shooter Crossfire X, developed by Smilegate and Remedy, which is not only shutting down in May, but will also become...
But of course, we saw the better version of the Marvel vs. Avengers thing, which was Guardians of the Galaxy game, which was pretty damn good, though. And fun. If you haven't checked that game out, it's pretty fun.
completely inaccessible, and that's for both the multiplayer and the single-player component. As Video Games Chronicle reports in their article here, stating that both multiplayer and
saw this
campaigns will
game.
be
I
inaccessible.
never got around to it though.
There's also something that if you look at the official blog
cousin
post
taught me about
announcing
this.
service closure, you can see down here that they not only announced the decision to end support for the game on May 18th, 2023, but also linked to an FAQ where you can find a section titled, "Will I still be able to play the Crossfire X campaigns?" They specify here that you'll be able to enjoy and complete them until servers close on May 18th, 2023, which is another way of saying that single player will not be accessible after May 18th. While it's not necessarily a game that people will miss, the Metascore and user scores here speak for themselves. It doesn't change the fact that this is a game that will be lost in history. It's a game that won't be preserved. And even if it's far from the most beloved game ever, it doesn't change the fact that there are people who bought this game and still expect it to be accessible because they spent money on a product. But unfortunately, with live services, there's the possibility that the money you spent will go towards a product that will just turn to dust. This is why I hate those games, specifically those live services, who
never get your money back.
The single-player mode
Such a part about
an
these
online connectivity requirement that is completely unnecessary. The single-player component, which should be able to stand on its own, gets dragged down alongside the now defunct multiplayer component. Another casualty from February 2023 was none other than Back 4 Blood, the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead. As stated here by Twitter user Low Ping, Back 4 Blood is officially being abandoned by the developer less than 2 years after release. Meanwhile, in a game released 14 years ago, and these two screenshots highlight the concurrent players on Steam for Back 4 Blood versus Left 4 Dead. You can see right here Back 4 Blood's player base very quickly sunk into the low thousands before it was decided that the game's live service component would no longer be supported. Meanwhile, Left 4 Dead 2, looking at this game's numbers, it's raking in tens of thousands of players every day. And as the Twitter user said, this is a 14-year-old game we're talking about that's still having long legs. Here's Turtle Rock's official announcement saying that this phase of our war
you expect this is the better or updated version of your game be better than the old game, but you know.
While we spin up another game. Now, it is emphasized here that Back 4 Blood won't be shutting down. The game will still operate and continue to be accessible, but in terms of expanding upon the foundation and giving people a reason to keep coming back to it, that's an aspect that just will cease to exist. Also reported on February was the shutdown of Konami's online murder mystery game. From sale just 10 months after launch. That game is titled Crime Side, and in 3 months as of the publishing of this video on May of 2023, the game will disappear forever. It will no longer be accessible. And you can see right here that the small community that did enjoy this game are none too happy to hear about this. It's why the recent reviews have been at mostly negative, a mere 20%. Versus the overall very positive review score of
see, when you have stuff like this, you know these games, these companies are just looking for a quick buck. That's all they waiting for. When they don't get that much, they just like, oh, we're abandoned, we're screwed the user base, fan base, gamers, or whatever. We're done.
It was likely higher before these mostly negative reviews poured in. A lot of the recent negative reviews come from people calling out the fact that Konami is still selling the game despite the fact that they've announced live service termination for it. While there is an article here that reads important service termination.
They just want the money. They just want your money, man.
It doesn't change the fact that not everyone might see this.
Yeah, they just want your money.
Making this available for purchase when the game is very much dead.
Yeah, they want.
Pretty egregious.
Again, like I said, they want your money.
New for Konami. Then comes this announcement a day before February kicked in: the shutdown of Echo VR, which is this VR sports game that I can only best describe as cyber Quidditch. You can see right here that this is a game that's garnered really good reception. The footage looks like this for those who are curious about it. Again, it very much looks like cyber Quidditch. You're throwing this ball, or I guess in this case, disc around into
like some Tron
rings or hoops or something. You're moving around in the air. It does look pretty fun. It does look pretty cool, but
Cyberball.
The decision was made to shutter this game forever, and this is one of those games that will not be available after it's shut down. Echo VR will continue running until August 1st, 2023, 10 a.m. Pacific, at which point servers and services will shut down, preventing any further play. A few days prior, on January 25th, 2023, Square Enix announced
I feel like they should give people their money back when it doesn't work out.
This is Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai, A Hero's Bonds. I actually hadn't heard of this
game. If your game
is
not free to play,
shutdown announcement was
especially if it's not free to play.
You can see right here that they're ending the service on April 26, 2023 at 8 p.m. Pacific. And because of its reliance on online connectivity, there's no way to continue playing this game offline after service termination. Moving back to February, here we have Knockout City, which is essentially a third-person dodgeball shooter or dodgeball brawler, whatever you want to call it. It actually looks pretty fun. I know some people have had a good time with it, but it didn't draw enough interest from players to be viable for the long term, so they made the announcement of Knockout City, how Season 9 will be their final season, and all servers will be shutting down on June 6th, 2023. And it is fully specified in their blog post here that after the shutdown happens, the game will no longer be playable, though they are trying to salvage aspects of it by creating a private server version on PC, so Knockout City can live on forever. At least this developer is making the attempt to do something like that. On some level, though the same couldn't be said about Rumbleverse, the battle royale brawler.
That was a
surprise. Down later this month on February.
I feel like they could put this
6 months after.
I always feel like they could put Rumbleverse into Fortnite. They actually could do that because it was not the prettiest looking, style, but the moves were freaking hilariously and fun. That shit was fucking amazing. To fucking do geese. Fucking slam and fucking almost the damn rock bottom on people and choke slam and all that stuff. That was freaking amazing to do. But it ain't look, it ain't had the greatest look or the style of characters. The way they looked all silly.
Launch, so a very short-lived lifespan. It is explicitly stated in the blog post down here that any player who has spent money on Rumbleverse is eligible for a refund of money spent on or in the game.
That's what I'm talking about.
At least they are doing right by customers.
That's what I'm talking about, man.
Have much longer legs.
That's what they need to do.
Rumbleverse will go offline.
That should be like mandatory. I feel like if your service go offline and you making money off of the service, and then your service dies, and you like, okay, we're done here. You get a freaking shit back. You get your money back, especially if you pay for stuff and your service only lasts about 2 years tops or 3 at least. If your service don't last longer than that, you should get like a freaking refund, in my opinion.
Tuesday, February 28th at 10 a.m. CST.
That's a year or 3 years. If it don't last that long,
so these are like 10 live services that I've just pointed out that have all been shuttered or have announced that they'll be shutting down or were canceled behind the scenes within just the last few weeks.
Exactly.
This has been a massacre.
That's been like
and if you go further back by a few months, you'll find games like Babylon's Fall have been shut down. Another Square Enix published live service, by the way. This is a game whose service will be ending later this month on February 28th, 2023. And once the shutdown happens, much like many other live services, you will no longer be able to play the game. Again, not necessarily a game that'll be missed, but a game just being able to completely disappear off of the face of the planet. Just the idea of people's game purchases being able to completely turn to dust and disappear forever, as if you never bought the product. That to me is not something that I'm on board with.
Exactly.
I think game preservation is important, even for the
This is why a lot of people like single player games, and because once you play a single player game, you can buy it. It doesn't change. Online don't have online, so your game doesn't have to be updated or none of that crap, or none of it. Just got to fix bugs, and you're good to go. But if your game is constantly online, and the server shuts down, and there's no private servers,
your titles. If you want to look at the full list of shuttered live services these past few weeks, here's Gematsu, who tweeted this bullet list, and I've covered most of these. And then there's this other list by Twitter Hunter, who highlighted many of the games that I have. Tragedy. It's been genuinely one of the worst periods ever for live services. And I've little doubt that part of the reason why this is happening is because of the economic recession we're headed into, and the fact that tech companies and some gaming companies have been negatively impacted. And so game companies are being a lot more reserved about taking financial risks and are focusing more on cutting costs. And part of that involves shuttering live services that are not generating enough revenue for them to be justified, for them to be maintained, which costs a recurrent amount of money for these companies. Many live services have been facing something of a reckoning. Once upon a time, companies would laud that live services were the way of the future for gaming, that single player or campaign driven or non-live service games would be forgotten.
They just
would be live services.
They literally just jumped on the trend. That's all they did. They saw Fortnite and PUBG and maybe I don't know, maybe H1Z1, maybe. I doubt it, but say so Fortnite, and the way it blew up with the battle royale, and of course, like any other games or back in the day, they would copy each other on demand, and you get all kinds of games of the same similar quality, and that's how they go. And that's usually how games companies go. They see one popular stuff do, and they do it
for the medium that is gaming, but because that will allow them to recurrently monetize all of their games, allow them to generate more profit through a more lucrative business venture that ultimately can potentially make games worse. Not to say that there isn't a place for live services in gaming, but when that's all they're focused on, and when they're focused on shoehorning games into a live service model just for the sake of monetization rather than because they have a good idea for something that could be a genuinely good live service game, you get games that feel so substandard because they were sort of shoved into a live service mold that isn't well suited for it. Now, that's not to say that all of these shuttered live services were bad. There were some among them that were actually pretty good.
Yeah, they were.
But live services ultimately live by the number of players that partake in the live service, the number of participants.
If your game's not good, you ain't gonna make it. That's literally how it goes. If your game sucks, you're gone.
Are the lifeblood of live services with a campaign
Or if you're a greedy ass company, then your game is definitely gonna die.
Game or a single player game or a non-live service game, if a game flops, it'll still live on, it'll still exist, but if a live service doesn't draw in enough players, it'll die off and then it'll just completely cease to exist.
Exactly.
And the reliance on these live services being inhabited by many players concurrently and the reliance on them returning continuously is becoming untenable as the market of live services becomes more saturated, with these live services demanding so much time from players, all of the grind that's involved. There are only so many players out there in the world, and they only have so much time in their lives.
That's also gonna kill your live service too. Is a grindy ass game that's like super grindy. Like you gotta spend like, I don't know, like in 10,000 hours, 10,000 of hours just to get something of a weapon or some bullshit.
To spend on so many games. So once the live service market becomes oversaturated, as it has become, there comes a point where there's just not enough players with enough time out there to be able to populate all of these live services that have oversaturated this market. And that's a problem that single-player games don't experience because you're not meant to play single-player games ad infinitum. You're supposed to be able to finish them after a dozen or 2 hours, after a couple dozen hours, maybe a couple hundred hours at most. And so even though the single-player game market is saturated, there are plenty of players with plenty of time to partake in a variety of these games because you're meant to spend a limited time with each of them. So this massacre of live services not only highlights the misguided thought process of believing that the future is all live services, it also highlights the downside to live services failing. These games, some of which might be good, disappear forever. Which is why these days I try not to get too invested in a live service, because you never know when all of your efforts, all of the progress you made in one live service, all of the work that you've done to accomplish certain tasks or obtain certain rare items, you never know when all of that will go to waste and will just straight up not exist anymore. Don't get me wrong, if a live service does succeed, it can become incredibly lucrative and pave the road to significant growth for a game studio or game company, pave the road to future projects. But the risks of live services have to properly be assessed. It can't just be a gold rush for live services, especially now that the market is so saturated. There's got to be an understanding that if the player base dies off as a live service goes on, then the lifeblood of the game is lost. The game will die. There are maintenance costs to consider that single-player games don't have to worry about, and single-player games don't rely on players playing that game forever. It just relies on how many copies are sold, whereas live services not only rely on how many players partake in the game, but also how long they stay engaged with the game. If they start falling out and the player base starts kind of diminishing, then the gameplay of a live service straight up ceases to function because it was built around players interacting with each other, and when there are not enough players to interact with in a game, then the live service ceases to function, which is not something you can say about single-player games, which are their own isolated worlds and instances. The folly of this gold rush towards live services is becoming abundantly clear these past few weeks as all of these different live services meet an untimely and unceremonious demise. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I think it's time for game companies to start dialing back on this notion that everything has to be a live service, because we're starting to see now how that mentality is getting a lot of companies in a lot of trouble, and it's losing them a lot of money that could have gone into compelling single-player experiences that may not have made as much money as a Fortnite per se, but might have made its money back. This is not me trying to say that there's no place in this industry for live services.
Of course
and that
not.
it should be all single-player games. What I'm saying is, if you treat live services as a shortcut for financially lucrative ventures, if you treat it as a shortcut way to make money, that mentality is going to come back to bite you in the ass, because just like single-player games, live services succeed by their ability to stand out, by their ability to generate word of mouth, buzz that spreads like wildfire, because people can't help but talk about a game's merits. That's the stuff that's
that's one of the real crazy things about it. Like, if you're trying to be quick, make a quick buck out of it, and you see it, people can notice that this game is not like polished or not done, and it's like, oh, we in early access, but you showing off like just your bare bones game, and it's not even fun, and it's like laggy or choppy or something like that. Yeah, your game is gonna die real quick. Even though you, oh, we can fix this, and we're gonna have an update for this. People, your first impression is literally like the first and last impression of the game. That's word of mouth. Now, that's the bad part about live service. If your game don't start off good, or people don't see the potential of your game, and then you update the game and you make it worse, yeah, your game is gonna die, regardless of what you say out your mouth. And then they see that next update for that game, and it doesn't do nothing, or doesn't quell the suspense, or what people think your game can do. You're fucked.
Going to decide whether your game is commercially successful or not. Going live service and putting all of your eggs in live services, that's not going to be the automatic win button. There are only very few live service IPs that generate billions of dollars every year. And to compete against that, you really have to come up with something that is inspired. Also, inspired, or you have to bring your A game straight up. You cannot half-ass no live service game. It might have worked back then, H1Z1 or something like that might work back then. But, once you throw the people that play your game under the bus or whatever, you're done. Not something. It still could be fun, but your game is going to be just seeks life support, exploit the nature of live services. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I hope that game publishers are looking at what's going on here, the onslaught that's happening at the money for live services, and realize that factory producing live services and tripling down on this genre of games isn't going to automatically yield success, isn't automatically going to make them all the money. Or at least that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this slew of live service deaths. And to be further updated on all things game news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah.
Well, there you go. There's the video. Yeah, Young made some good points. Exactly. As always. But yeah, man, it's that stuff. A lot of live service games just like got wiped out, like straight up wiped. That's wow. God damn. Yeah, this right here. I already knew this was gonna go, but Rumbleverse, that was surprising. And usually mobile games usually last long, but surprisingly they getting rid of them. So I'm guessing they ain't put up much effort in these mobile ones, or if they did, it was not enough. But of course, when you playing mobile games, you fight against Genshin and all the rest of these other mobile games that comes out, and their games are pretty good. And of course, the gacha mechanics, of course, but there's another thing to fight against. But yeah, jeez, man, there you go. Dragon Quest Adventures, wow. All right. But yeah, these games and these companies, when I heard like EA and all that stuff was talking about single player games are dead, I'm like, do you know you run on a live service? Your game, it literally breeds death. Your game could die literally around the corner. All you gotta do is take the servers off for about a week or 2 weeks, or make it a month longer, and watch your fan base die. Just watch them complain and die. Like, when the hell is the service coming back? Your game will be dead, and you will receive that negative reviews 24/7. But single player game, don't have to worry about that at all. Just get your money, play the game. If it's like it, keep it. If not, return to the store. Or a refund if they make it that long. But there you go. Live service games. They get taking a hit. Taking a goddamn hit. A beat down, if you will. So yeah, we gotta watch. It might be more coming out later. We'll see.